In the heart of an ancient African village, nestled between golden fields and towering baobab trees, lived a young orphan girl named Ebony. She had no family to call her own, yet her spirit remained unbroken. Despite the hardships of growing up without parents, Ebony was known throughout the village for her kindness and humility. She worked tirelessly, tending to the elders, fetching water from the river, and helping farmers with their harvest in exchange for a small share of food. Life in the village was not easy for an orphan. Many viewed Ebony as an outcast, offering her little more than passing glances or whispered pity. But she held no resentment. She found solace in the stories passed down by the village elders, tales of fate, destiny, and unseen forces that guided those with pure hearts toward greatness. Though she had no riches, Ebony believed that kindness was a treasure greater than gold. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a mysterious traveler arrived at the village's outskirts. His clothes were torn, his face weary, and his steps slow as if he had walked for miles without rest. The villagers eyed him with suspicion, wary of outsiders, and none offered him shelter. The stranger slumped against a tree, exhaustion evident in his every movement. Ebony watched from a distance, her heart stirred by the sight of his suffering. Ignoring the disapproving looks of those around her, she approached him with a small bowl of food and a gourd of water. "You look like you need this," she said softly, offering him the meal. The man's tired eyes met hers, gratitude flashing across them as he accepted her kindness. "Thank you," he murmured. Little did Ebony know, this one act of compassion would change her life forever. Who was this traveler and what destiny awaited them both? Ebony's village was a small but vibrant community, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. The village thrived on unity, with families working together to farm the land, fish from the nearby river, and weave beautiful fabrics that were sold in distant markets. Music and storytelling were the heartbeat of the village, with elders sharing ancient tales around the fire at night, their voices carrying the wisdom of generations. But for Ebony, life in the village was different. As an orphan, she held no place within any family. The people saw her as a burden, a reminder of misfortune, and though they did not harm her, they offered little kindness. She was given the most difficult tasks, fetching water from the farthest well, cleaning the communal spaces, and tending to the sick when no one else would. Children her age mocked her, calling her names and refusing to play with her. Women of the village dismissed her, believing she brought bad luck. Despite the rejection, Ebony remained kind-hearted. She did not allow bitterness to take root in her heart. She found solace among the village elders, who welcomed her presence when others turned away. She often sat at their feet, listening intently to their stories about destiny and the unknown paths life could take. The elders spoke of great leaders who once walked as beggars, of warriors who were once cowards, and of the unseen hands of fate weaving every person's journey. Among them was Grandmother Ife, the wisest of all. She had watched over Ebony since she was a baby and saw something special in the girl. "The river does not know where it will flow," Grandmother Ife would tell her, "but it always finds its way to the sea." Ebony clung to these words, believing that one day she too would find her way to something greater. She often dreamed of a life beyond the village, where she could be free from the whispers and pitying looks. She imagined traveling to faraway lands, where people would see her not as an orphan but as someone with purpose. She longed to be more than just the girl without a family, to be strong, respected, and to write her own story. At night, she would sit by the river, watching the stars reflected in the water, whispering her dreams to the wind. "One day," she would say to herself, "I will find where I truly belong." Little did she know, fate was already listening. The sun hung low over the village as a weary traveler staggered through its dusty paths. His clothes, tattered and stained with the earth, clung to his tired frame. His face was hidden beneath the hood of a worn-out cloak, and his bare feet bore the marks of a long journey. He leaned on a simple wooden staff, each step heavy with exhaustion. The villagers cast quick glances his way but paid him no mind. Travelers came and went, most seeking shelter or a bit of food before moving on. This one looked no different. Some women whispered among themselves, their voices laced with suspicion. The village headman, sitting in the shade of a large baobab tree, simply waved him off when he approached. "We have nothing for beggars," the headman muttered, turning his attention back to his game of mancala. The traveler sighed, his stomach twisting with hunger. He had not eaten in days and his body ached from the journey. He looked around the village, hoping for a shred of kindness, but found only indifferent faces. He took a few more steps before his knees gave way and he collapsed onto the hard ground. Ebony, who had been gathering firewood near her small hut, saw the man fall. Her heart ached at the sight of him. She knew too well what it felt like to be overlooked, to be treated as if you did not matter. Without hesitation, she set her bundle of wood down and hurried to his side. "Are you hurt?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The traveler's voice was hoarse. "Just tired," he managed, his breath shallow. Ebony placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Come. You cannot stay on the ground like this." With effort, she helped him to his feet, guiding him toward her humble hut at the edge of the village. It was small and simple, barely more than a thatched roof supported by wooden beams, but it was hers. Inside she had little to offer, but she made do. She fetched a bowl of porridge she had saved from the morning and placed it in front of him. "Eat," she said softly. "It's not much, but it will help." The traveler looked at her, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. "You would give your food to a stranger?" Ebony nodded. "Everyone needs kindness. Besides, I know what it's like to go hungry." He took the bowl with shaky hands and ate slowly, savoring every bite. When he finished, he leaned back against the hut's wall and exhaled deeply. "You are generous," he said, "and wise beyond your years." Ebony smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's not wisdom, just kindness." But the traveler saw more than just kindness in her. He saw strength, resilience, and something rare, an unshakable spirit. Though she did not know it yet, her small act of generosity would change the course of her life forever. As the days passed, the stranger remained in Ebony's hut, regaining his strength. At first he spoke little, only offering brief words of thanks. But as he healed, he began to open up, engaging Ebony in long conversations by the firelight. They spoke of many things, of life, of dreams, and of the world beyond the village. Ebony told him of her struggles as an orphan, of how she had to work twice as hard to earn the respect of others. She shared her dreams of a life beyond the village, of a world where kindness mattered more than status. "I want to go where people are judged by their hearts, not by their birth," she said one evening, gazing into the flickering flames. The stranger watched her closely. "And what would you do if you found such a place?" Ebony thought for a moment before replying. "I would help those in need. I would show them that even the smallest kindness can change a life." A faint smile played on the stranger's lips. "You have the heart of a leader, Ebony." She laughed softly. "I am just an orphan girl." He shook his head. "No. You are more than that." Despite their growing friendship, the stranger remained guarded about his past. Whenever Ebony asked where he came from or what had brought him to the village, he would divert the conversation with a thoughtful question or a vague answer. "The road has been my home for a long time," he said one night. "And sometimes the journey teaches more than the destination ever could." Ebony sensed there was more to his story, but she did not press him. She had learned long ago that some truths revealed themselves in time. However, the village elders had begun to take notice of the stranger's presence. They were wise and observant, and they had lived long enough to know that a man who hid too much often had something to protect, or something to hide. One evening, as Ebony returned from fetching water, she was stopped by Elder Badu, a man whose deep wrinkles told of many years spent watching over the village. "You are kind, Ebony," he said, his voice low and steady. "But kindness without caution can be dangerous." Ebony frowned. "What do you mean?" "The man in your hut," the elder said, his gaze sharp. "We do not know who he is, nor what he brings with him." "He is just a traveler," Ebony insisted. "Perhaps," Elder Badu said. "Or perhaps he is something more." The warning unsettled Ebony, but she did not believe the stranger meant any harm. Yet, as she thought back on their conversations, she realized how little she truly knew about him. And then there were the subtle hints, the way he carried himself, not like a weary traveler but like a man accustomed to command. The way his words held wisdom far beyond that of an ordinary wanderer. Who was he really? And why had fate brought him to her? The days passed, and while the stranger remained quiet about his past, something in the air had shifted. Ebony could feel it, a tension lurking just beyond the village like a brewing storm. Unknown to her or the villagers, a band of warriors had been searching the land. Their mission was clear: find the lost prince before their enemies did. They rode across distant lands, asking questions, following whispers, and leaving fear in their wake. Meanwhile, back in the village, the chief, a stern and cautious man named Okoro, had begun to take notice of the traveler. Unlike the villagers, who had been too indifferent to offer the stranger help, the chief's mind worked differently. He had ruled for many years and knew that in times of peace, danger often arrived in the quietest of ways. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chief Okoro summoned Ebony to his hut. She hesitated at the entrance, her hands tightening into fists. She knew why she had been called. The chief sat before a fire, his face cast in flickering shadows. "Abeni," he said, his voice steady, "I hear you have taken in a traveler." She nodded, standing tall. "Yes, Chief Okoro." He was weak and hungry. I could not turn him away. The chief exhaled slowly. "A good heart can be both a blessing and a curse. Do you know who this man is?" Abeni's brow furrowed. "He is just a traveler." "And yet," Okoro said, leaning forward, "he speaks with wisdom beyond his years. He moves like a man trained in battle. He carries himself like someone who has known command. Abeni, strangers do not come to a village like ours without reason." Abeni's heart pounded. She had wondered the same thing, but hearing the chief voice it made the unease settle deep in her bones. "He has done nothing wrong," she insisted. "He is kind." "Kindness does not mean innocence," the chief warned. "I have lived long enough to know that secrets bring trouble. Tell your traveler to leave by morning." Abeni's hands clenched. "That is not fair. He has nowhere to go." The chief's eyes darkened. "That is not my concern." Word of the chief's order spread quickly. Some villagers agreed with him, whispering among themselves that it was unwise to trust a man who revealed so little. Others simply didn't care. After all, what was one stranger to them? But a few, especially the elders who had watched Abeni struggle all her life, sided with her. The divide grew, tension rising like smoke in the air. That night, strange things began to happen. A cold wind swept through the village despite the warm season. The cattle, usually calm, grew restless, stamping their hooves as if sensing danger. And then there was the sound, a distant rhythmic pounding like drums from far away. Yet no one could say where it came from. Abeni sat outside her hut, staring into the darkness. She could feel it now, the shift in the world. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. The night was unnaturally still. Even the wind held its breath. Abeni lay awake, staring at the roof of her small hut, unease pressing against her chest like a heavy stone. She had seen the way the chief watched the traveler, how the villagers murmured in hushed tones. Something was coming. She could feel it. Then it happened. A thunderous roar shattered the silence. Abeni bolted upright as screams filled the air. The village, once peaceful, was now alive with chaos. Firelight danced in the darkness as warriors, dozens of them, stormed through the narrow pathways, their weapons gleaming under the moon. Abeni's heart pounded. She scrambled to her feet and rushed outside, barely stopping herself from colliding with villagers who were running in terror. The warriors were unlike anything she had seen before, clad in dark armor, their faces hidden behind masks, their presence radiating authority. Then she saw him. The stranger, the man she had taken in, stood tall in the middle of the village. But he was no longer the weary traveler she had met days ago. His posture had changed, his expression no longer humble but regal. The fire reflected in his deep, unreadable eyes, and suddenly, Abeni realized the truth before he even spoke. He had never been just a traveler. One of the warriors, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "We have searched far and wide for you, my prince," he declared, his voice firm but respectful. "The kingdom awaits your return." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Villagers who had once ignored him now stared in awe. The chief, who had demanded the stranger leave, looked as if the ground had crumbled beneath him. Abeni struggled to find her voice. "Prince?" she whispered, her throat dry. The stranger turned to her, something unreadable in his gaze. "My name is Al-Yamide," he admitted. "I am the rightful heir to the kingdom of Oyo." Silence stretched across the village. The truth had finally been revealed. The warriors who had arrived as intruders, now lowered their weapons and dropped to one knee before their prince. It was a sign of loyalty, of submission. These were not mere raiders, they were his people, his protectors. The villagers, once fearful, now looked upon him with reverence. Abeni could see the shift in their eyes. Moments ago he had been a stranger. Now he was a king in waiting. Abeni took a step back, her mind racing. She had spent days by his side, sharing her thoughts, her dreams, believing him to be just another lost soul. Had he known all along? Had he been hiding his true identity from her, or had he simply not been ready to claim it? Her thoughts were interrupted by the chief, who took a cautious step forward. "If you are truly the prince," he said, his voice more measured now, "then why did you not reveal yourself sooner?" Prince Al-Yamide met his gaze with steady confidence. "Because I needed to see the world beyond the palace walls. I needed to understand my people, not as a ruler looking down from a throne, but as a man walking among them." His words hung in the air, undeniable in their truth. Abeni's chest tightened. Despite everything, she could not ignore the feeling that their bond had been real, that even now he was still the man she had shared her humble meals with. And in that moment, as the village looked upon him in awe, she realized something else. Her life would never be the same again. As dawn broke over the village, its people gathered in the central square, their eyes filled with awe and uncertainty. Prince Alyamide, no longer a nameless traveler, stood tall before them, his regal presence undeniable. The warriors who had once stormed their village in search of him now stood at attention, ready to escort their prince back to his rightful place. Ebony watched from the edge of the crowd, her heart torn in ways she had never imagined. Just days ago she had been nothing more than an orphan, surviving through kindness and hard work, overlooked by the very people who now gazed at her with admiration. Now, because of her simple act of compassion, everything had changed. Alyamide turned toward her, his eyes searching hers. "Ebony," he said, his voice filled with warmth, "I owe you my life. If not for your kindness, I may never have found my way back. I want you to come with me, to Oyo. Stand by my side in the palace." A hushed murmur rippled through the villagers. Ebony's heart pounded. The offer was more than she had ever dreamed of, a life beyond the village, beyond hardship, a chance to be part of something greater. But fear gnawed at her. "This is my home," she said hesitantly, glancing at the familiar huts, the dusty paths she had walked since childhood. "I have never known anything else." Alyamide stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Home is not always where we are born, Ebony. Sometimes it is where we are valued." Ebony lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. For years she had longed to belong, to be seen as more than just an orphan. Now, the village that had once dismissed her looked at her with reverence. They whispered among themselves, realizing how wrong they had been. It was Ebony, the girl they had overlooked, who had brought them honor. One of the village elders, a woman with deep-set eyes and silver hair, stepped forward. "Child," she said, her voice kind, "your heart is pure and your wisdom is beyond your years. It was you who saw the worth of a stranger when none of us did. We were blind, but you have taught us the power of kindness." Ebony felt her throat tighten. The same villagers who had once ignored her were now seeing her for the first time. The village chief, who had doubted Alyamide from the start, nodded solemnly. "You have brought pride to our village. We will not stand in your way if you choose to leave, but know this, whether you stay or go, you will always be one of us." Ebony's heart swelled with emotion. She turned back to Alyamide, the man who had once been a stranger but had become something more. She had saved him, and in return, he had given her the chance to change her fate. The question remained, would she take it? The journey to Oyo was unlike anything Ebony had ever imagined. The dusty paths of her village gave way to vast grasslands, winding rivers and towering mountains. Each step carried her farther from the life she had always known and closer to an uncertain destiny. Prince Alyamide rode at the front of their caravan, his warriors flanking him on all sides. Despite the armor they wore and the weapons they carried, he remained at ease, speaking to Ebony whenever they stopped to rest. He sensed her unease and reassured her with a smile. "You are not just traveling to Oyo," he told her one evening as they sat by the fire. "You are walking toward the future you were always meant to have." But the road to the palace was not without its dangers. As they neared the capital, they encountered scattered groups of rebels loyal to the usurper who had stolen Alyamide's throne. These traitors had long believed the prince to be dead, and news of his return sent ripples of fear through their ranks. One night, as the caravan camped near the river, shadows moved in the darkness. The attack came swiftly, arrows whistling through the air, swords clashing in the moonlight. Ebony had never known true battle, but she did not cower. As chaos erupted around her, she remembered the lessons the village elders had taught her. The power of instinct, the strength in standing firm. She grabbed a fallen warrior's shield and used it to protect the wounded, calling out to those who needed help. Alyamide fought with the skill of a true king, cutting through the enemy lines with precision. When the last of the attackers fled into the night, his eyes found Ebony's. "You are fearless," he said. But the battle was only the beginning. As they finally reached the grand gates of Oyo, the kingdom buzzed with rumors. The lost prince had returned. Some rejoiced while others plotted in the shadows. Inside the palace, the usurper sat upon the golden throne, his expression darkening as Alyamide entered the great hall. He had ruled for years through fear and treachery, never expecting to be challenged. "You are nothing but a ghost," the usurper sneered. "A boy who should have died in the wilderness." Alyamide's voice rang through the chamber. "I am the rightful king, and I have returned for what is mine." Ebony stood beside him, her presence a silent testament to the journey they had taken. The court watched with bated breath as the two men prepared for a final confrontation. This was not just a fight for the throne, it was a battle for destiny itself. As the golden sun rose over Oyo, the great city hummed with excitement. Crowds gathered outside the royal palace, filling the air with cheers and rhythmic drumbeats. The long-lost prince had returned, and after a hard-fought battle, justice had prevailed. The usurper had been defeated, and the kingdom was once again under the rule of its rightful heir, King Alyamide. Abeni stood among the gathered nobles, her heart pounding as she watched the coronation ceremony unfold. She had never imagined herself in such a place, dressed in fine garments woven with gold, her hair adorned with beads that shimmered like stars. Yet, despite her new appearance, she remained the same girl who had once toiled in the fields of a humble village, guided only by her kindness and unwavering spirit. As Alyamide knelt before the high priest, the ceremonial crown, a magnificent piece of gold and onyx, was placed upon his head. The people erupted into joyful cries, bowing before their new ruler. He rose, his gaze scanning the crowd until it rested on Abeni. Then, before the entire kingdom, King Alyamide turned to his most loyal companion. "There is one among us who showed kindness when the world turned its back on me. When I had nothing, she gave me shelter. When I was weak, she stood by my side. Without her, I would not be standing before you today." Abeni's breath caught in her throat as he extended a hand toward her. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Who was this young woman, dressed in royal silks yet carrying the quiet strength of someone who had known struggle? "She is Abeni of the village of Takunda," the king declared. "And she shall be honored as a sister of the throne, for she has proven that true nobility is not born of blood, but of the heart." The gathered nobles bowed their heads in respect, and the people cheered her name. Abeni felt overwhelmed, unsure of how to respond. She had never sought riches or recognition, only to do what was right. But fate had chosen her for something greater. In the days that followed, Abeni was given a place of honor within the palace, her days of hunger and hardship now distant memories. Yet she did not forget her roots. She walked among the people, sharing her wisdom with those in need. She visited her village, bringing gifts and teaching them that kindness, even in the darkest moments, could change the course of a life. The village elders who had once told her stories of fate and destiny, now looked upon her with pride. Their words had come true. Kindness had indeed worked in mysterious ways. And so, Abeni's name became legend, forever remembered in the songs of Oyo, as the orphan girl whose heart had changed the fate of a kingdom. Abeni stood on the grand balcony of the palace, gazing over the vast kingdom that stretched beyond the horizon. The morning sun bathed the city in golden light, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. It was a world so different from the one she had known, a world of power, riches, and endless opportunity. Yet, deep within, she remained the same Abeni, the orphan girl who had once struggled to find her place in a village that never truly embraced her. Her journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. From an outcast scorned by her own people to the most honored figure in the kingdom, fate had carved a path for her that she could have never imagined. And yet, when she looked back, she realized it had all begun with a simple act of kindness, the day she had given shelter to a weary traveler. King Alyamide, now a beloved ruler, often reminded the people of the lesson Abeni had taught him. "True kindness," he would say, "is rewarded in ways we never expect. A single act of compassion can change the course of history." The kingdom flourished under Alyamide's just rule, and Abeni, though she never sought titles or riches, became a respected figure throughout the land. She was known not as a queen nor as a noblewoman, but as a wise counselor, a sister to the throne, and a guardian of the people. She used her position not for power but to help those in need, ensuring that no orphan or outcast would ever feel as alone as she once had. Despite all she had gained, Abeni never forgot her roots. She often returned to her village, bringing knowledge, prosperity, and healing. The very people who had once looked down on her now welcomed her with open arms, realizing the error of their ways. They had learned that one's worth was not determined by birth, but by the goodness of their heart. As time passed, Abeni's story became legend, passed down from generation to generation. The elders told children of the orphan girl who had once helped a stranger, never knowing that he was a king. They spoke of how destiny had rewarded her kindness, proving that even the smallest gestures could lead to the greatest of fates. One day many years later, as Abeni walked through the palace gardens, a young girl approached her. The child, no older than 10, had the same longing in her eyes that Abeni had once felt. My lady, the girl said, her voice filled with curiosity, do you ever regret leaving the village? Do you ever wish things had been different? Ebony smiled, kneeling before the child so they were at eye level. Regret? She repeated softly. No, my dear. Every step I took, even the painful ones, led me here. And if I had never met the stranger, if I had turned him away as the others did, then I would not have learned one of life's greatest truths. The girl tilted her head, eager to hear more. Ebony gently took the child's hands in her own. We do not always see where our kindness will lead. Sometimes it may feel as though it changes nothing at all. But kindness is like a seed planted in the earth. You may not see it grow at first, but one day, it will bloom in ways you never expected. The girl's face lit up with understanding, and she ran off to share Ebony's wisdom with her friends. Watching her go, Ebony felt a deep sense of peace. She had come so far, from an orphan without a family to a woman whose name was spoken with reverence. Not because she was powerful or wealthy, but because she had proven that even the smallest person with a heart full of kindness could change the world. And so, the tale of Ebony lived on, a timeless reminder that in life, we may not always see where our choices will lead, but kindness, even when unnoticed, is never in vain. For fate watches all, and the unseen paths of life often lead to the greatest rewards.